Hey guys, welcome to the Slectigames 10 and 25 man guide for the first boss in the Mogushan Vaults, the Stone Guards. For 10 man you want to bring 2 tanks, 2 healers, 1 to 2 melees and 4 to 5 range DPS, while you want to bring 3 tanks, 5 healers and 17 mixed DPS to 25 man. You highly prefer range DPS here. In this guide, we'll break down all the boss abilities, explore different strategies, and cover the key changes in the heroic version. Let's dive in. 10-man raids feature a rotating trio of the Stoneguard bosses each reset, while in 25-man raids all 4 bosses are present every time. The core mechanic of this fight is Petrification. One of the Stoneguard bosses will begin casting Petrification, which gradually slows the entire raid over time, eventually to the point where you can't move at all. To prevent that from happening, your goal is to trigger an overload on the petrifying boss by intentionally pushing their energy to 100. This will interrupt the petrification and reset the slow. But there's more. While petrification is active, the raid gains a 90% damage reduction against that boss's abilities, including their overload explosion. This makes it safe and strategic to force that boss to explode. Let's break down which abilities are affected by this damage reduction and how to control energy generation so that only the petrifying dog overloads, not the others. The Amethyst Guardian casts Amethyst Pool, creating large void zones that deal continuous shadow damage to players standing in them. These pools persist for the entire fight, making positioning and space management increasingly difficult. However, during Amethyst Petrification, the raid takes 90% reduced damage from Amethyst's abilities, meaning these pools can largely be ignored during that window. The Jasper Guardian casts Jasper Chains, linking 2 players together. If they move more than 10 yards apart, they begin taking fire damage, which increases by 25% per second. If they remain separated for 15 seconds, the chain will break. On Heroic, the ramping damage becomes lethal very quickly, so it's crucial to intentionally break the chain during Jasper Petrification, when damage from his abilities is reduced by 90%. The Cobalt Guardian lays down Cobalt mines, glowing traps that explode when triggered, dealing damage and stunning nearby players. In heroic mode, they can chain react, setting off nearby mines and causing massive disruption. The safest way to handle them is to either trigger them during Cobalt Petrification, when the raid takes 90% reduced damage, or use immunity abilities like Cloak of Shadows, Deterrence, or Divine Shield to safely clear them without taking damage or being stunned. The Jade Guardian casts Jade Shards, a raid-wide AoE that deals nature damage to all players. This damage is constant and unavoidable. It just needs to be healed through. During Jade Petrification, the damage is minimal, so it's the best time to push healing cooldowns elsewhere or focus on movement-heavy phases. Now that we've covered the basics of the Stoneguard encounter, let's dive into one of the most critical aspects of this fight, tanking mechanics. Whether you're running this in 10-man or 25-man, the way tanks handle the bosses and their energy levels can make or break the encounter. One key mechanic to keep in mind is solid stone. When a Guardian isn't near another Stone Guard, it reverts to stone form, taking 90% reduced damage, and most importantly, it's not gaining any energy. That might sound like a relief, but it's actually a crucial part of managing overloads. You need to carefully rotate which boss is left alone to control their energy gain and avoid multiple Guardians reaching 100 energy and exploding at the same time. So now that you understand how Solid Stone works and how important it is to keep energy levels under control, let's see how this plays out in practice. In real raids, tanks need to make quick decisions based on which Guardians are active, who is building energy, and whether a petrification is coming up. And that's exactly what we're going to look at next. I'll walk you through a few different scenarios, and your job is to figure out the next tanking move. Which boss needs to be taunted, who should go into stone form, and how do you keep those overloads from overlapping. Let's start with the first one. In this scenario, we are in a 10-man setup with Jasper and active. All active bosses are stacked at the pole to maximize our AoE damage. We are waiting for the first petrification and holding the bosses together until they reach around 15 energy. This time, Cobalt Petrification begins. So the question is, which boss needs to be taunted out first to avoid an unwanted overload? If you were paying close attention, you might have noticed there are actually 2 correct answers here. Since we want the Cobalt Guardian to be the one that reaches 100 energy first, we need to keep him stacked with either Amethyst or Jade. That means the off tank can taunt out whichever of the other two you don't want charging with Cobalt, leaving just two bosses gaining energy and making sure Cobalt overloads first during the Petrification. Alright, but here's the catch. If we leave Cobalt and Jade stacked together, they'll both reach 100 energy at the same time. To prevent a double overload, we'll need to make one more taunt swap before that happens. Can you figure out which boss needs to be moved next? That's right. We need to swap Jade and Amethyst one more time before the overload. This ensures that only Cobalt reaches 100 energy and explodes. The ideal time to make the swap is when Cobalt and Jade are around 60 energy. Let's take it one step further and look at what happens after the first overload. Cobalt has exploded and now we're waiting for the next Petrification to begin. This time, it's Jade Petrification. So the question is, which boss needs to be taunted next to stay in control of the fight? You got it. We swapped Jade with Amethyst, which allows us to safely push towards our next desired overload without risking any overlaps. Good job. Let's move on to 25-man tanking. As we've already covered, all 4 Guardians are active in 25-man, but you also get an extra tank, which gives you more flexibility. This means you can keep the bosses stacked a bit longer after the pull, usually until they reach around 30 energy, before you start splitting them up. In this example, we get a Cobalt Petrification. So, how do we handle the split? Exactly. The Cobalt Guardian needs to stay stacked with any one of the other 3. The remaining 2 bosses get pulled away so they don't continue gaining energy. In this case, we kept Cobalt and Jade stacked together, while Jasper and Amethyst were separated. We hold the setup until Cobalt and Jade reach around 60 energy. But we can't let them both hit 100 energy. So, what's the next swap to avoid a double overload? That's right. We swap Jade with either Jasper or Amethyst. In this example, we swap Jade with Amethyst, which lets Cobalt reach 100 energy first and safely explodes. After that first overload, we wait for the next Petrification and watch the energy levels closely. We get a Jasper Petrification. So what's the next correct move? You got it. We swap Jasper with Amethyst, making sure Jasper overloads safely while avoiding accidental overlaps. And with that, you've officially earned your Stoneguard tanking achievement. Congrats! Now let's take a look at one final way to handle this fight, the cheese strat. With enough damage and strong raid cooldowns, you can choose to keep the bosses stacked for longer or even never split them at all. This means you'll get uncontrolled explosions, but if your healers can keep up, you can push through them. To make this work, you want to use every available raid cooldown, and a Spirit Link totem is absolutely mandatory here. A quick reminder, don't use immunities while standing in Spirit Link or your health won't contribute to the shared pool, and you'll put others at risk. Lastly, let's cover what changes in Heroic mode. While the basic abilities hit harder and become even more important to manage, there's one major new mechanic you'll need to deal with, living crystals. At the start of the encounter, each Guardian leaves behind a crystal on their spawn point. Clicking on a crystal applies a 10-stack debuff to the player. To remove stacks, you need to run over floor tiles that no one else has touched. Each unique tile you step on removes 1 stack, and the higher your stacks, the more damage you take. So the goal is to clear the stacks quickly. An extra word of advice, the debuff from the crystal is linked to its Guardian's Petrification, which means you'll want to time it smartly. For example, if Cobalt Petrification is active, that's a great time to use the Cobalt Crystal, since you'll be taking 90% reduced damage from it while you clear your stacks. So why do we paint the floor? Every unique tile you step on while carrying a crystal debuff grants your entire raid a 1% damage boost and 1% increased spirit. This helps your healers avoid going and your raid can push phases faster, reducing the risk of messy taunt swaps or unexpected overloads. But here's the catch. These bonuses aren't permanent for the entire fight. They reset at 70 and 40% boss health, meaning you'll need to repaint the floor from scratch twice during the encounter. So painting the floor isn't just a bonus, it's a core mechanic for a smooth and efficient heroic Stoneguard kill. Best of luck.